Welcome everybody to our introduction to our temple and teachings. This will be a brief history of Buddha's life, a brief history of the rise of Pure Land Buddhism and where our temple fits into the world. I see a lot of faces that I recognize. Thank you for being here, and a special welcome to those of you who might be new. Welcome. Buddha was born Siddhartha Gautama about 2,500 years ago in Lumbini, which is just on the border between Nepal and India. And you can see where that is in India on this map here. He was born into a kingdom, but we're not quite sure when. Approximately 2,500 years ago. Some people believe that was 600 BCE. Some people believe 500 BCE. Some people believe 400 BCE. Interestingly enough, there was an archaeological dig in 2013 that suggested it may be earlier in that timeline than we otherwise believe. So there's more credence now to the something closer to 600 than to 500. He was born the son of a king. His mother died shortly after childbirth, but he was raised as a prince. There is a story that a soothsayer said to his father, the king, "Your son is going to be either a great warrior or a great holy man." And the king wasn't crazy about his son becoming a holy man, and did a great many things to provide the ideal life for Siddhartha. He didn't see old people, he didn't see sick people, he didn't see dead people. He lived inside the walls of what is essence the palace city, and didn't venture out for quite some time. He was a happy young man, a young prince. He got married, he had a child, everything was good. And then there were different versions of this story. Either once or four times he went out with his chariot driver. He kind of snuck out and took a look around, and what he saw shocked him. He was shocked, I tell you. He saw dead people, he saw sick people, he saw beggars, and he said, to none of which he'd seen before, old people. And he said to his chariot driver, "What the heck is this?" And his chariot driver said, "Dude, this is real life. This is the way the world really is." He was so upset. He left. He left his kingdom. He left his wife. He left his child. They would reconcile later, but he left and wandered the Indian countryside for 6 years. He was 29. He fell in with a group of ascetics. And if you don't know much about asceticism, it is like everything fun is denied to you. If you really want to be holy, no food, the small group that he fell in with were so severe that they said Siddhartha should be able to live on a grain of rice and water a day. And he was so eager to find the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, that he tried that and became so emaciated that he nearly died. The story is that he was found by a milkmaid very near death. And again, depending on which version of the story you hear, she gave him rice milk, she gave him milk, she gave him rice, she gave him something that sustained him. And he thought, what am I doing? And he regained his health. He started eating again. He started living a more normal life. And the ascetics that he was with rejected him. They said, "Dude, that's not the way to live, be gone." And once he was healthy enough, he went on his way, and he found a fig tree. It wasn't yet a Bodhi tree. He's not yet Buddha, and the tree is not yet Bodhi. It's a fig tree on the outskirts of a little farming village. And he said, "I'm going to sit here until I figure this out." And again, the stories differ, but it is believed he sat there for 40 days. Now, he was no longer an ascetic. He was eating. Who was feeding him? My favorite version of this part of the story is from Thich Nhat Hanh's Old Path, White Clouds, where it was, and my version of Thich Nat's version is, the moms of this village said to their kids, "You take this naan, you take this bowl of rice, you take this fruit out. You see that holy man sitting under the tree? He knows a lot of stuff. You take this to him and you eat with him, and you listen to whatever he has to tell you because he's an educated man. And the children would gather and bring food. And if he were meditating at the time, they would wait. They would wait silently until he came out of meditation. He would look at them. He would say, "Hi, kids." He would say, "Oh, look what you brought me today." And they would start to eat. He'd say, "Okay, today's lesson is applied physics." And this went on for days as he spent his time meditating. One night of a full moon, around 2 in the morning, he had his aha moment. And it landed on him and he said, "I've got this now. I understand now." And over the rest of that evening, probably when it was still dark, he had several thoughts. One of them was, do I share this with anybody else, or does everybody have to come to this on their own? By the way, the tree he was under probably looked a lot like this one. This is a Bodhi tree, fig tree, very old. And probably he wasn't sitting under this exact one because it would have been old then and it would be even older now. Anyway, he was sitting trying to figure out, could he teach anyone else this, or did everyone need to come to this themselves? And again, as Thich Nhat Hanh tells the story, the next time the children gathered, one of the things that one of them brought was a basket of tangerines. And he decided to use this to give his first lesson as Buddha. And he said to everybody, okay, take one of these tangerines, and before you eat it, just look at it, just admire it. Notice the beautiful color. Notice how the color of the rind goes so well with the color of the leaves. Notice the dimpling on the outside of this near perfect sphere. And as you begin to peel it, as that aroma erupts out of this, inhale that and notice the pleasure in simply the way this smells. And when you finish peeling it and you've broken it into sections and you put a section in your mouth and you bite down, and this explosion of flavor in your mouth, the sweetness, the tartness, the way it is, appreciate this for what it is. This is being mindful, he said to the kids. Then he said to them, because none of them had done this yet, because he hadn't told them to, they're all holding, he said, look at the tangerine in your hand and appreciate where it came from. It came from a farmer who picked it and brought it to the market, and that's where your mom went and got it. But before that farmer picked it, he was tilling the soil around that tree. He was pruning the tree. Before that tangerine was formed, it was a blossom, and it was the rain sustained it, the sun helped it grow, and before that blossom emerged, that tree had to grow, and that farmer had to till that soil. And before that, he went on to say, if you go back and back and back and see how everything is connected, you can also see the entire universe in the tangerine you're holding in your hand. He decided he would go on, and yes, he would keep teaching. He found those ascetics and he said, guys. He probably didn't say it like this, but basically he said, I think you've got it wrong. I think we don't need to be denying ourselves everything. I came from wealth and privilege. You guys are trying to convince yourselves you can scrape by on a grain of rice a day. There is a middle path. There is a middle way. That's the way I think we should go. He went on to say, we want to start with the four noble truths. They are, all life contains suffering. The cause of suffering is ignorance. The way to overcome ignorance is wisdom. The path to wisdom is the Eightfold Path. And he laid out the Eightfold Path, and that is right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These are the precepts that build Buddhism. He lived and taught for another 45 years. He gathered a group of acolytes who traveled with him, But they together traveled from place to place, from city to city. Sometimes the crowds were very large. Sometimes the crowds were more urban. Sometimes the crowds were more rural. But it is said that Buddha looked at who he was talking to, and if they were rich, if they were poor, if they were angry, if they were sad, he fashioned his lesson for what they needed to hear. And in doing this, day after day after day, for 45 years, he taught thousands and thousands and thousands of lessons. It's said that, and he gained a notoriety. People knew who he was. They knew who his followers were. The wealthy in town would welcome him into their homes. They would feed him. They would give him a place to stay. He would give them a lesson. He would move on. It is said that one wealthy man, when Buddha was in his 80s, went out himself to prepare a dinner for the Buddha, picked mushrooms himself, brought them home himself, and rather than having his staff do it, he cooked them himself and served the Buddha this that he had prepared himself. The Buddha started to eat it and knew fairly quickly something was wrong. He said to the man, take the rest of these, bury them. Don't let anybody eat them. And he and his disciples left, but he was very, very ill. He finally could travel no longer, and he laid down. And as he lay dying, he continued to teach his followers. The last lesson he said to them is, if what I've been teaching you works for you, keep it. If it doesn't work for you, find another way. Follow your own path. By the way, I think he looked remarkably well for a guy in his 80s, but he died and Buddhism continued. Buddhism went on. Buddhism spread first through India and then from India north and east through China, into Japan, south and east through Sri Lanka, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. Notice that Tibet is in there. Pockets that began to develop their own, as is true, everywhere that Buddhism landed, as Buddhism was introduced, the culture of that region was folded into the Buddhist religion itself. In India, there are hints of Hinduism in Buddhism. In Japan, there are hints of Shinto in Buddhism. The Buddhism seems to absorb the culture of the area that it's in, but Buddhism continued to spread. Over the centuries, Buddhism, two forms of Buddhism began to develop. Theravada, the more conservative version, followed the teachings of Buddha and only his teachings. No added bells, no added whistles. If Buddha didn't say it, it's not part of what they do. They follow the Eightfold Path. They look to overcome greed, ignorance, and hatred, become enlightened, and obtain nirvana. But the other segment that began to develop was called Mahayana. Mahayana said, you know, this Buddha stuff is a little dry. Let's add a few things. Let's start at about 100 BCE, depending on when Buddha was, 400 or 500 years into Buddhism, came the rise of Mahayana, and through Mahayana, the rise of Pure Land Buddhism. Pure Land Buddhism is, of course, part of the Jodo Shinshu culture and the segment of Buddhism that we follow. And you may ask, although I think everybody here knows, you may ask, what is Pure Land Buddhism? Pure Land Buddhism, the Pure Land is the place across the water that you cross. This picture is probably too small for you to see all those rafts of all those people approaching the Pure Land, and all of these people who were already there. Here's Buddha sitting under his Bodhi tree, and everyone is living in a state of bliss. Now, the question is this a place you go after you die? Or is this something you can obtain while you're alive? Can you find enlightenment and therefore the Pure Land while you are alive? Different people have different thoughts about that. But the along with Pure Land Buddhism, the Mahayanas brought into Buddhism the story of Dharmakara. And a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Dharmakara was a king. And he wanted to be a bodhisattva. And he was talking with another guy and said, how do I go about doing that? And he, as the story goes, spent ages of kalpas, which means thousands and thousands and thousands of years, working on becoming a Buddha. And he created the 48 vows, most of which are, if I don't get this accomplished, may I never become a Buddha. And after thousands and thousands and thousands of years, he became Amida Buddha. The most, probably the most popular and perhaps the most influential of the 48 vows is the 18th vow, which says, if I should attain Buddhahood, yet sentient beings of the 10 directions who aspire to be reborn in my land with wholehearted faith and joy, even having just 10 thoughts of my name, would not be reborn there. May I not attain perfect enlightenment. Interestingly enough, the 18th vow contains a coda, kind of like it was written by a lawyer, kind of like the boilerplate. And the boilerplate goes, the only exception are those who have committed the 5 great violations and those who have slandered the right Dharma. But when he attained Buddhahood, he became Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha is the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-loving version of Buddha. At our temple, Amida Buddha is here in the center. I could not find a closer picture of Amida, but most of you have seen this. The halo around Buddha, around Amida's head, has 48 rays. Those 48 rays represent the 48 vows that he took. Buddhism came to Japan about 550 AD. And again became popular and had been around for 500 or 600 years when Shinran Shonin came on the scene. Shinran was born in 1173. This is not a baby picture. I don't think there are any baby pictures of him. This is when he was older. But Shinran's life is in many ways similar to Buddha's life. He was an orphan, and at 9 years old, he said to his uncle, I want to go to Mount Hiei. I want to go to the temple there. I want to become a monk. And his uncle said, okay. And he did. And he was there for 20 years. By the way, this is how you engaged in Buddhism at the time. If you wanted to be a Buddhist, you became a monk. You were assigned, you were either a warrior monk, or you were a farmer monk, or you were cleaning bathrooms monk. You were training in some form of monkhood, and you spent your life doing that. Buddhism was not preached to the masses, not yet. It was an isolated, very politically powerful in Japan, very politically powerful group, but isolated and not preached to the masses. Shinran Shonin was there for 20 years, and at the end of 20 years, at the age of 29, said, I don't get this, and left. Interestingly enough, that's the age Buddha was when he left as well. Shinran Shonin also went and found a place to meditate. This is the temple where he meditated. By the way, that picture is taken from the Starbucks that is next to this temple now. If any of you have been there, you know. But Shinran Shonin also sat and meditated. Again, the story is for 40 days, and he had a vision, and the vision was, you should go find this man Honen. Honen was teaching the Nembutsu. And if there happen to be any of you who don't know what the Nembutsu is, it is it is in that 18th vow. If you say my name, Namu Amida Butsu, the name Amida is right there in the middle. There are a couple of English translations of Namu Amida Butsu. The more common is I take refuge in the Buddha. The Reverend Conway introduced me to one that resonates for me better, which is, I bow before the Buddha of infinite wisdom and infinite compassion. And that is Amida. Amida is the Buddha of infinite wisdom, infinite light and infinite life, which is also translated as infinite wisdom and infinite compassion. And the thing that Honen was doing, first of all, Honen was doing a couple of different things. That was the beginning of Jodo Shinshu, of Jodo Shu. And again, the structure of Buddhism in Japan at the time was very political, very powerful. They waged wars, they aligned with shoguns, they did all kinds of things, and they were also very conservative, and they were not happy about what Honen was doing. But Honen was, among other things, preaching to the masses. And I'm not sure whether Shinran got this idea from Honen or whether he simply aligned because Honen thought like he did, that Honen said enlightenment should be for everyone, and was basing his teachings on that. Now, as I said, this is not going over well. In 1207, when Shinran was 34, there was a pretty powerful lord nearby, and a couple of his concubines heard the Nimbutsu from a couple of monks and went back and said, this is really cool. This is really good stuff. He complained bitterly to the powers that be, the Buddhist powers that be, and they brought literally destruction down upon Honen and his followers. Some of them were executed, and some of them were exiled. Honen was exiled. Shinran was exiled. They never saw each other again. And Shinran was sent off to live among the farmers and the fishermen, and continued. They were all stripped of their priesthood. So he said, I am neither priest nor layman. I am foolish, bald-headed one. But he continued his preaching in his style to the masses. About 4 years later, they were pardoned. And a year after that, Honen died. Honen was 80 at the time, and he died. Shinran did not come back to Kyoto for a good long time. Some people believe, Reverend Miyoshi told me just recently, that that may have been because the politics were still so anti-Nimbutsu in Kyoto. He continued to teach, but he eventually came back to Kyoto and worked on his great masterpiece. Near the end of his life, he lived until he was 90, and near the end of his life, he was doing more editing than he was writing, but he was putting together the masterpiece that became the guide for Jodo Shinshu. The Honen's practice was Jodo Shu. Shinran's was the practice that came out of Shinran's writings was Jodo Shinshu, which is the kind of like, we're making a little tweak on Jodo Shu and we're calling it Jodo Shinshu. Okay. One of the things that I, in learning about Shinran, that I appreciated most was, and again, I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, there are days when I get this. There are days when I see the path to enlightenment and it all makes sense, and then it's gone and I got to start over again. And I thought, I understand. I understand that. I understand. Okay. He died in 1263 when he was 90. But Jodo Shinshu arose to become the most popular form of Buddhism in Japan. And in fact, once again, it became so popular, it became so, for lack of a word, powerful, that a shogun, Tokugawa, said to the ancestors, to the progeny of Shinran, who were still running Jodo Shinshu, you guys are too powerful. I'm going to break you up. You are going to be, there's Shinran again. You are going to be, half of you are going to be on the east, and you're going to be Higashi, and the other half are going to be in the west, and you're going to be Nishi. And that has been true for the last, what, 500 years. And it's interesting, if you go to a Nishi temple, that a lot of it is similar, and yet over those hundreds of years, there have been differences that have evolved. But both Higashi and Nishi built temples in Kyoto and continued to 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 serve Jodo Shinshu, not only in Japan, but in other parts of the world as well. This is the Founders Temple at the Higashi Honganji in Kyoto. This is an amazing building. Again, you have to get back so far to get all the building in. You can, these are people, if you can see them. If you put that building on a football field, it would be almost as long as a field is, and actually wider than a football field. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, wooden building in the world. And this is also, this is the Honzan. This is the mothership of all things Higashi Honganji. And in America, we are part of the North American district, which is connected to the Honzan. And we have temples here, temples in Hawaii, temples in Berkeley, that are part of the North American district. This is our temple at its current location. The first temple was built in 1904 in Little Tokyo on 4th Street. It changed locations several times. It was in Boyle Heights for 50 years, but eventually in 1976, it came back to Little Tokyo on the 3rd Street location where it is now. It is served by Bishop Nori Ito, who is Rinban, which is the head reverend of this temple and also bishop of our district. And Reverend Peter Hada, who put together this thing we're all doing today. And we also have the Reverend Fred Brinion, and of course, Reverend Miyoshi is from West Covina. And what's one of the interesting results of us all being confined because of COVID is that in the Zoom, like this, we are not at this temple today. We are here on Zoom, which means any of you could be anywhere. In the classes, the Coffee and Dharma that happens once a month would happen at this temple is happening on Zoom, and people from anywhere can stop in. Reverend Miyoshi is teaching a group on Thursday mornings and a class every other Tuesday, and there are members from Berkeley attending Reverend Miyoshi's classes. We can be, in many ways, more united in some ways because of COVID. We are still connected to the Nishi Temple. It's a short walk. It's a 10-minute walk from our temple. And one of the reasons we are connected is because Reverend Bill Briones is the head reverend here, and he also happens to be married to Reverend Miyoshi, who is our reverend at West Covina. So there's still a connection there. For any of you who don't know, in some ways, this is no surprise, I guess, in a largely Christian nation, but in some ways, a Sunday service is like a Christian service. Notice that there are pews. We also have a choir. We have the Otani Gakuen. There is a Dharma talk, which is similar to a sermon. And we do things like help feed the homeless, which many churches do. Ways that we are different is the chanting. We chant the Shoshinge, which is, of course, among the writings of Shinran in Chinese and Japanese. Is what Shoshinge is. And there have been times when everyone around me is chanting, and I am reading the translation to see what it is that we're chanting. By the way, Reverend Conway and I have had casual discussions about Shinran wrote in poetry. He wrote in verse. And there have been a couple of attempts to translate into English the poeticism of his writings. And if you know anything about poetry, most of them have failed miserably. I think it would be hard. But Reverend Conway and I have had casual discussions about giving iambic pentameter a try, maybe when I'm fully retired. Anyway, um, we also, in addition to the chanting, we also have offerings. For any of you who have not been here, this is where one would make an offering to Amida at one of these incense stands. Um, here are the basic beliefs for our form of Buddhism. Buddha was a man, not a god. I I I know that those I know that Amida Buddha seems to come across as godlike, but Buddha never said he was a deity, and Buddhism is technically not a religion for that reason. Um, the major ideas that we follow are mindfulness, the story of the tangerines, um, and acceptance that everything is changing. If any of you listening right now are considering the spiritual path that you want to be on, you might consider that one of the precepts that was part of Buddha's aha moment is everything changes. Everything is changing all the time. And when we try to hang on to things that are changing, we suffer. And we can lessen that suffering by accepting. That first car that we bought, that we were so excited with the new car smell and it was the best thing we ever had, and 15 years later your mechanic is telling you it needs a new transmission, which will cost you more than the car is worth, and you say, what happened to my car? You are not accepting change and you are suffering because of it. But the concern, the perception of Buddhism in that accepting nature is that we look inward too much, we navel gaze too much, and we simply accept what is around us too much. And I believe that that is a perception that needs to be addressed. There are many people right now, many Buddhists right now, working hard to be part of what is called engaged Buddhism. And we're going to stop the slideshow right now, and I'm going to show you a short clip of a woman talking about exactly that, talking about what it means to be engaged.
Dear Dharma family, hello. I am Mielke Kane Barrett from Houston, Texas. Today we received, finally, word that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would be our next executives in the coming year, 2021. Certainly, we are happy and pleased with this result. And for the moment, we can experience joy and happiness around a change that is coming up. However, it's important for us to understand that nearly half of us in this country voted for a return of Donald Trump to the White House. And what does that suggest to us? That we are truly in a very divided country. We don't understand each other. And these days, it's hard to speak to each other without getting into heated arguments and disagreements. There's something that I think we as bodhisattvas who practice Buddhism must be prepared to do. We cannot look at Biden and Harris as our saviors. It is time for us all to recognize that as citizens of this country, we must be involved. We must persist in indicating to our representatives what it is that we want to see. And we have to be able to work alongside them to make sure that our plans and desires are implemented. And as Buddhists, we must embody the Bodhisattva spirit, the Bodhisattva path. and recognize our mission to carry the Buddhist teachings to all beings. Because we cannot look at over half of our country and say, that's not me. It is us. We are all connected, and it is incumbent upon us that we take on this task of sharing the Dharma and making our world a better place for all beings, to make our land a safe haven for all of us, and to recognize the being in each one of us, the Buddha nature in each one of us, that we are not different. We suffer in the same manners in different arenas, to be sure, but we all suffer and we all find ways to overcome. So let us be inspired and driven to embody the principles of our Buddhist teachings and share them with the world so that we can truly become the Buddha's Pure Land. And remember, the Buddha does not see difference. He sees neither this one nor that one. All are the same. And that is a principle I am certain that we can all enact within our lives. So let's go forward. Let's get involved. Let's create the country we want to see. Thank you.
This is an example of engaged Buddhism. Obviously, that's a bit old. It's from right after the inauguration, but still, it's powerful, and I think it still applies. There are other engaged Buddhists working in other ways. Whoops, did I do that wrong? I might have done that wrong. After George Floyd was killed, a number of Black Buddhists came together and said, basically, what can we do? Here is a short excerpt from what one of them said. Pamela Ayo Yatende and her colleagues have created the Buddhist Justice Reporter, the George Floyd Trials, which she says is an engaged Dharma practice project that may offer a constructive interruption and inject a fierce and wise compassion into all of this. They intend to do this by writing about the trial of the police officer charged with George Floyd's murder. Other forms of engaged Buddhism. Thich Nhat Hanh has been an engaged Buddhist. He wrote the book Old Path, White Clouds, which I was talking about earlier. He's written about 35 books. He's in ill health now. But in the 60s, he was asked what he thought about engaged Buddhism. And he said, all Buddhism is engaged Buddhism. If it's not Buddhism. He also said, mindfulness must be engaged. Once we see that something needs to be done, we must take action. Seeing and action go together. Otherwise, what is the point of seeing? So when you are looking for the path you want to take, remember that introspection and acceptance is good. What the world needs right now is engaged Buddhists.